Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and thank you so much for being here. Today we're gonna cook just a little bit. I alluded to in a recent video that I had some blood work done and it wasn't great, and I do have a procedure coming up. I have a heart arrhythmia that I'm gonna have a little ablation for, but in prepping for that, once I saw my blood work and knowing going forward that we have to eat right, I thought today we'd focus on a couple of Danielle Walker recipes. They're both new to me, so there's always a risk in that. If you are new to the channel, I will link, I've done 1 or 2 videos in the past about dieting. I will link those below. Basically, I've lost about, well, now because I've gained about 30 back, I've lost about 170 pounds. I was down at one point a little more than 200 pounds. So I need to get these extra 30 that I've been carrying off. Not that I couldn't lose more. I absolutely could. But post-menopausal, it gets a little harder. So at this point, I would be happy just to get an extra 30, 40 pounds off. So we're gonna eat healthier. I'm not focusing on calories. I'm just focusing on eating right, eating 3 meals a day. If I snack, it's generally fruit, which I know I have to be more aware of now because of my blood sugar levels. This is kind of a new learning place for me to be, but I kind of thought maybe we'd go through some of it together. Let's get into it. This is the book that we're going to be cooking out of today. It is Danielle Walker's Healthy in a Hurry. Her initial book was Against All Grain. She doesn't use any grains. She doesn't use processed sugars. She will use maple and honey and that kind of thing. I am not doing that yet, so I'm skipping the recipes that talk about anything that adds a sweetener of any type. There's nothing processed. It's all real good for you foods. The first recipe we're doing is actually going in the crock pot because we're getting ready to leave the house today, and this is the one we're gonna have this evening. So it's super easy. It's just basically chicken and some spices. She does call for thighs. I use thighs sometimes, but they're just not my favorite. So I'm gonna use chicken breasts and cut them into smaller pieces. All of her recipes make a lot, so you can either freeze part of it. I half them sometimes. We eat them for lunches for days sometimes. It just depends on my mood. So I'm going to make a full recipe of this, and it is the coconut chicken curry that is on page 101. This is our goal. When she is done, she puts it on cauliflower rice, which is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a real rice for my husband, but I will put it on cauliflower rice, so let's get into it. Okay, these chicken breasts are huge. This is 3 pounds, almost exactly, of chicken breast, which is what it calls for. But since it calls for thighs, and thighs tend to be smaller, I'm gonna pretty much third them. That's what I'm thinking. And that makes it easier to do portioning. I probably wouldn't eat any more than 2 of those, but my husband can eat 3 or how many ever he would like. I would not have wanted to run across this chicken on his turf. This was a big chicken with that chicken breast. And then all we're gonna do with this is put it in our crock pot liner, which I've already brought over here. This is a little one that I picked up at Target. I will link it below for you if I can. I have had a million, maybe 1.5 million crock pots through the years, big ones and small ones, and it doesn't matter which one I have. If I have a big one, I wish I had a small one. If I have a small one, wish I had a big one. So I have one of each now, but I also have my Ninja, which is like a I think they call it a multi-function pot, but you can saute in it, which you cannot do in this, but you can saute in it. But I find that when you cook in it for a slow cooker, like low for 8 hours they say, or high for 4 hours, I find like in my Ninja it goes way too quickly. It gets done way too quickly. And this was really inexpensive. I want to say maybe $25, but it might not have even been that much. Like I said, I will link it down below. And then basically all we are adding to this is salt, spice, and then a can of coconut milk. But since we're slow cookering, I'll show you what I do with the coconut milk. Let's go ahead and get these in. Okay, we have 1 tablespoon of garam masala, so you know, we're just looking for about that much. 2 teaspoons of fine sea salt. These are only half, so in theory I need 4. This seems like a lot of salt, but sea salt does seem to be less salty than regular salt. 2.5 teaspoons of ground cumin. So we need 5 of these. This is smelling so good already. I love spices. I will put spice in basically anything. 2.5 teaspoons of turmeric, so 5 of these also. Turmeric is really good for you. It is anti-inflammatory, and they say a lot of people put it in their smoothies. I like it. It has a real ground earthy taste, but for me it's really just a savory thing. 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, which I almost never use because generally speaking I prefer to use real garlic. But you know what, if Danielle Walker is telling me to use garlic powder, we're going to use garlic powder. 1 teaspoon of onion powder. We use a lot of this in my house because my husband doesn't mind the taste of onion, but he just doesn't really like cooked onions. I know it's really hard to cook around that, and he said he's willing to be more adventurous, but luckily this one called for onion powder. And 1.5 teaspoons of ground coriander. That is all the spices that go in here, and I can tell you that the smell of the spice coming off this is amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a really good turn because I want to get all of those spices all over all of that chicken. I mean, it's coating it like if we were, can you guys see? It is coating it like if we were making fried chicken. I mean, there is spice just even laying in the bottom of this. This is going to be so tasty. I think everything is good and covered. So with the coconut milk, you never really want to put your coconut fats in here because if you do, it could curdle. So I've opened my coconut milk and I just realized it didn't really firm up. I stuck it in the fridge because here we are in the middle of summer and the top gets kind of loose and you can't really slow cook. You can, but it will separate. Coconut milk all day because it does tend to separate or get lumpy looking. So I put it in the freezer hoping it was long enough that I would be able to move it and pour the liquid out. I can't. So how, I guess maybe I'll strain it. Oh my goodness, that is gonna make such a mess. How am I gonna do this? In her recipe book, it says just to go ahead and put this in here. And you know what? I am tempted to do it. I'm just doing it. You know what? If it's good enough for Danielle Walker, it's good enough for me. Breaking all of the rules. I am just going to go ahead and put all the coconut milk in here and hope for the best. So if when I'm showing it to you guys at end of day, it's a little chunky, well, we'll know that's why. So I've just brought it over and put it in my crock pot. I keep my crock pot on a small pedestal. I think we actually got that in a box maybe, and it's just a pedestaled cutting board, but I kept it because I think that, oh, so handy, but that's what it looks like. Oh my gosh, it looks lumpy already. Let's cover it up and pretend like we can't see that. So we're going to put it over onto low. This has just got off, low, high, and warm. We're just gonna put it over on low and it's gonna cook, you know, they say like 6 to 8 hours, but I find that chicken is often done in 4. So we will come back when we get back from our little outing. We're going out to meet friends, but I'm eating healthy, so I'm not gonna eat while we're out there. So when we come back, we will spoon this over some cauliflower rice and we'll see how lumpy it is. Maybe my lumps will melt. Let's be optimistic. Okay, see you in a little bit. 5 hours later. I will admit, it is not the prettiest thing that I've ever made because you guys know we had some lumpy coconut milk, but I will tell you, my house smells so good. We came back to the most lovely smell. So let me go ahead and plate this up and we'll see how good it is. This is what it looks like plated up. I have to tell you, probably one of the most unattractive meals I've ever made. It is absolutely not gorgeous, but the chicken is just as tender as can be from being in the crock pot for about 5 hours. That is delicious. I like it a lot. The chicken probably could have been cooked less than I cooked it, but we were away from the house and it was really nice to come home to a nice warm ready-made meal, but I will absolutely make this again. I will probably next time cook it in some chicken broth and then stir in the coconut milk at the end because I would like it if it was a little more soupy. In the picture in the book, it looked a little soupier than this. So that's what I will probably do just to have it be a little bit more like soup, especially going into the winter months. So, okay, I will see you tomorrow with another. We are here the next day. A couple of things. I did not love last night's dinner. When we sat down and started eating it, the curry was like, okay, I like this. And then as we went on, I discovered I did not love it. And I have to tell you, I think that is the first Danielle Walker recipe that I've made that I didn't love. So we're gonna go on today. Today we are still working out of Healthy in a Hurry, but we're gonna make, I know, we're making this that seems incredibly optimistic. It is chicken cordon bleu with creamy Dijon stuff. Creamy Dijon sauce. It would be adorable if it was stuff, but it's creamy Dijon sauce. So we're gonna work out of this. I'm going to do a voiceover because we are here. It is evening. Things are happening. So I'm just gonna set to cooking on this. A couple of things about it. One, it has crumbs in it. You can tell from the picture. If you are grain-free, what she recommends doing, and it is what I'm going to do, is take plantains and put them in your food processor and process them to crumbs. And then you have breadcrumbs, but they're compliant and you've added no bread, which I think is perfect. So let's get into it and see how this one goes. Okay, first thing I want to let you know is I do love this meal. It turned out really well. So what I'm showing you now is the ingredients, talking about my Cuisinart, because we're going to take those Goya plantain chips, which is the first time I've ever had those, and we're going to grind them up in the Cuisinart. The other ingredients, we've just got Dijon, some cashew butter. I don't love cashews, but I liked cashew butter. I was really amazed. This was the first time I had ever used nutritional yeast. I'm sure there are a lot of vegans and vegetarians out there being like, yeah, it's the way to go with dairy. I was very, very doubtful and surprised how much I really liked it. Arrowroot, if you are grain-free, it's a great way to do your thickening. Super easy. The little jar is just what I keep my sea salt in. An onion, my husband gave me the go-ahead. The jar, which I have turned the wrong way. It, you know, that's me. You guys know. And then, oh, it's ghee. I didn't even tell you what was in the jar. And then that is deli sliced ham. And it goes in because what we're faking here is a cordon bleu, all of our chicken. And you do the slices. Instead of stuffing the chicken, you just chunk the chicken. And it also calls for wine. And I didn't want to add wine. And it said you could use chicken stock instead. I didn't have any defrosted chicken stock, so I got out my Better Than Bouillon, which is my go-to for chicken stock. It is my absolute favorite. It's easier than dealing with the boxes. I do use a lot of bone broth. I generally make my own bone broth if I have to buy it. I love the Thrive brand bone stock because it's a great value and I like their bone stock. I also like Trader Joe's bone stock. You know, sometimes I need it now. And I don't have the just a couple days that it takes for Thrive to get it to me. I'm always impressed with how quickly they ship, but I don't always have those 2 to 3 days. The Trader Joe's brand is my next favorite. So we're just chunking up the chicken. It calls for 2 pounds of chicken. This one actually calls for chicken breast. So I love that. I guess, I don't know why. I don't know how they decide when to use thighs and when to use breast, but I almost always use breast. My husband and I both prefer it. We know we give up a little bit of the tenderness for it, but that's probably for me partially a throwback to a million years of doing Weight Watchers and counting points. And if you used chicken breast, it was fewer points than dark meat chicken. So I really got into the habit of breast, and now it's actually my preference. I know this is blurry. I didn't realize that, unfortunately, when I was taping it. It soon will not be blurry, but we're going through a blurry phase here. Sorry about that. So this meal turns out so good. It's not what I didn't care for about the first recipe. It was a me thing. I just felt like the spice as I ate it, not a heat spice, but just all of the actual spices just built and built. And it just kind of became too much for me. So it just wasn't my favorite. Maybe cutting back the spices or, yeah, probably just cutting them back a little bit because there were a lot. So I just sliced up the 6 ounces of deli meat, gave it a toss to separate it. The Goya plantain chips, I usually buy the Trader Joe's plantain chips. It called for 8 ounces. This Goya bag is only 5 ounces. It was plenty. It absolutely did not need more. I just keep worrying it until it gets to a pretty chunky crumb. It's kind of like a really thick panko, but I decided it would be fine. But the Goya plantains in the future, that's what I'll buy. They were absolutely delicious. Here's our onion. It calls for the onion. I was so excited. My husband was like, go ahead and use it. I love cooked vegetables. I am a veggie girl. I could probably be a vegetarian, but my husband is the exact opposite. He will eat any raw veg. He loves raw veg salads. He'll snack on it like a crudité. But when it comes to chopping veg and cooking it, he just is not a fan. And for many, many years, that is how we have lived. But he's like, you know what? It's healthier. Go ahead and be adventurous. It also calls for stock in this sauce that we're making that I called stuff earlier. It calls for chicken stock. And as I said, I didn't realize I didn't have any. So I'm taking my nice better than bouillon and making myself some chicken stock. Here is our cashew butter. This was the first time I have used cashew butter. I will not eat cashews. I will not eat mixed nuts because I feel like the cashews make everything else in it taste like cashews. That's how much I dislike cashews. This was, of course, a natural butter. That's why I'm stirring it. I was so impressed with this as a butter. It really, now partially maybe because I used it in a savory meal, but I felt like it really took on the peanut butter satay taste and feel. It was just absolutely delicious. I was fully prepared to be like, nope, don't love it. Got to make myself love it. But that's so good. This is just a teaspoon of the Dijon. That's so good that I like it because so many things that are grain-free and dairy-free use cashews as their alternative. This was also my first go with nutritional yeast. And I was like, this is going to be so weird. There's no way. People use it as a Parmesan replacement all the time. And I was like, there's just no way. And I'm looking at it thinking, okay, this is going to be so weird. And then I smell it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. This totally smells like Parmesan. It only called for like a tablespoon in the whole recipe, but it was still, it gave it that nutty flavor. It was fantastic. We added some arrowroot, some salt, just to thicken it up is what the arrowroot's going to do. That's just a little garlic powder. I don't think we talked about that earlier, but just a little garlic powder. I will try and put the recipe down below if it's one that Danielle has made public herself. If it's not, I feel bad because it's in the book, but as long as it's one that she's made public, I'll link it down below. Either way, I will also link her book. This is The Healthy in a Hurry. I have all of her books except for she just released one about 2 weeks ago and I haven't gone out to get it yet. So I need to do that because I refer to her books all the time. This is just our tablespoon of ghee. You use that instead of regular dairy because ghee is just butter basically that they've cooked down. And I think it's the fat solids that they remove. At that point, any diet, even Whole30, that's dairy-free, they consider ghee an okay food. So we're just melting this down, and we're going to saute our onion in it for a little while. I love the smell of sauteing onion. Just for the record, I know my husband doesn't like a lot of the cooked veg. You would be surprised how many times I will take meals to a certain point, and then I will adapt them on the side with a small pan where I will saute all the veg that's called for in the meal for myself and then stir it into my portion when the time comes because personally, I love veg. I love it cooked. I love it raw. It's probably my favorite. So they tell you to move all of the onions to the side. And I do. I wouldn't do that again. I would go ahead and just take it out. Because working around it, this is like a 14-inch pan, so it makes a lot. And working around the onion on the side it's a pain in the butt, to be frank. So I would probably just take it out next time and put it back in when it's called for. So that's all we're doing now is they say try and get a little brown on the chicken. As you can see, I clearly overcrowded the pan. It's fine. I always feel like I'm searching for just the right piece of chicken that's broken the law and I'm the helicopter from above. My pepper grinder has a spotlight on it. Don't want to miss one little square inch. But it always makes me think of helicopter spotlighting whenever I see it. Anyway, there's just random thoughts from Catherine. I like pepper. You might think that I'm using too much. I want to get every little bit of it that I can. I use fresh ground because it makes it spicier. We like our foods
spicy. And when I say spicy that way, I mean a little hot. We like it when it has a little bite from heat. And freshly ground pepper can sometimes fill that need if it's a really good pepper. I buy actually an organic black pepper that I found on Amazon that I just love, and it gives some good spice. You don't always just have to spice your foods. This is me trying to stay out of those onions, and you can see how incredibly successful I'm being. Like I said, if I did this again, I would go ahead and just take the onions out. This was a meal that was, we had it for dinner, both of us. We both had it for lunch again. And then I think I had it for lunch 3 more days after that, at which point I said, this is getting too old, and chucked what was left. And there was probably 2 more servings, lunch portion servings left. It's a lot. I mean, 2 pounds of meat, and we're only 2 people. It's a lot of food. And it was delicious. Spoiler alert, I really liked this one. Okay, you can see I have set my cast iron on the front burner. It's my favorite thing to brown vegetables in because it gets such a nice brown to them without overcooking them. That's just onion, and I'm getting ready to toss in a zucchini. This is just what I've decided for myself I'm going to serve as a side dish. I probably chopped my husband up. He loves peppers, just raw peppers. I don't chop it up, obviously. I do it in strips, and cucumber, that kind of thing, I generally do for him some sort of raw veg. But this is just going to be onions and cucumbers. I buy a lot of onions. I don't ever want to run out of onions because I love them. And once they start getting a little old, toward the end of a bag, what I will do, and I learned this, I think, from Becky over at Acre Homestead, is I will take the last few out and chop them up and put them in a freezer bag. And then I put that bag in another freezer bag so my life doesn't smell like onions entirely inside the fridge. And I keep that bag in there. And like I did this evening, when I need chopped onion for something like that, I used a fresh onion in the real meal. It only makes a tiny difference, but it's so handy. I decided last minute that I wanted to do this zucchini dish, so I just threw some of those frozen pre-chopped onions in there. Super easy. Okay, I've gotten it to the temperature that I want it to be, to the brownness I want it to be. I've stirred in the onions. Now we're just going to stir in the ham. The only issue I had, I probably should have used tongs at this point because separating that ham was a little difficult. I really wanted to clump together because I had sliced it stacked, and they're just in theory thin ribbons, but slightly difficult separating, so probably should have employed tongs, but it doesn't matter. I just keep stirring and everything's fine. Okay, so I've given that a few minutes to cook down, gotten the ham as separated as I can. Now we're going to add the sauce. The sauce is just the bone broth, cashew butter, the Dijon, the nutritional yeast, the arrowroot just for a thickener, salt, and garlic powder. So it goes in nice and wet, and it does. It thickens up. It gets pretty tight. Actually, I would probably have the, not nutritional yeast, the arrowroot next time just to reduce the thickening, because by the time I get it done here and take it off, and then it's been some time in the oven, plus you put the crumb on top, it gets pretty tight. I think it could be a little looser. So next time I would probably go ahead and use a little less arrowroot. That said, it probably affected it more as I was going to say repeat, as a leftover for lunches, because it got so thick that it just was at that point devoid of any liquid by the time you're using it for leftovers, because your crumb kind of absorbed what was left. So I would probably use less arrowroot, and I might add like half again all of the sauce ingredients. So 1.5 times the sauce ingredients, and then thicken it a little less. I hope that's making sense, but it is absolutely delicious. And our final step is you just take I think it was a tablespoon of ghee, and you just put it in with your plantain chips, and it's kind of like making a crumb when you make like graham crackers and you add your butter. Of course, this isn't melted. You know what? Melted might have worked better. I might do that next time. Just melt it over it and drizzle it on it, because they just have you kind of work it into it So I just keep working it here for a while. And then all you're going to do once you get it good and worked in is you're going to put it over top of the, look how nice and bubbly it is. It looks so good. Over top of the Air Bunny's cordon bleu. But time to give the zucchini a stir and some love too. But I just love that bubbling action we're getting there from the cordon bleu. So once you get it good and worked in, which I just deleted about 45 seconds of myself continuing to work the butter into the crumbs, you just sprinkle it all over the top. And I'm trying to be all dainty and like, oh, let's get every corner covered. Trust me when I tell you, I only used a 5-ounce bag. She said you could use an 8-ounce bag of plantain chips, and this is covered. I mean, yeah, at this point I'm giving up the ghost. I mean, it is absolutely fully covered. All we're going to do now, pop it into the oven. It gets 2 to 3 minutes just to kind of get the top brown.
This is what it looks like straight out of the oven. It was all bubbly around the edges while I set up my camera. Well, let's give it a quick taste.
On my plate, let's get a little bit of everything in here. Let's find some ham. I know I put a lot of ham in there. It seems to have broken up, but I get that because I started a lot. And we've got the plantains. Let's give it a taste.
Pardon that I'm a little hot and sweaty after the cooking, and I've moved to my cell phone because my camera died. Salty. I used all the salt that she called for. If I was doing it again, I would cut back big time on the salt. The plantains on top add a lot of salt, so I would pull back on the salt everywhere else, but it has the cashew butter in it, and you know, we talked about I don't love cashews, but it has a very peanut buttery feel. This is delicious. So I will let you know, I'm gonna do a verbal outro, but I will let you know on our outro what I thought as we go along, because yesterday after the first bite, I thought I liked it too, but I feel like I'm gonna like this one a lot. Good morning. I have a sink full of dishes. We just finished breakfast. The one goal that I have for today, a person should probably have higher goals than this, but the one goal I have today is to get some chicken ovens ready, to get some chicken broth ready for the weekends. I don't have a lot of chicken, but I have a couple of huge, did you guys see how big they are? Huge chicken breasts. I'm gonna roast them first because I think you get better stock when you use chicken bones that you've already roasted. I think it's a deeper, better tasting stock. So I'm going to roast these chicken breasts up, pick them, and then I'm gonna put in, over there where my crock pot is, not where the dishes are, I'm going to put in a stock to make some nice stock for at least a good soup this weekend. Hopefully enough to get 2 soups out. That's how we're gonna start our day. The next thing we're gonna do is get into an Amazon box. We've talked in the past about how I lost the weight. I lost about 200 pounds. I used some Weight Watchers. I did a lot. I'll link a video at the end of this explaining what I did. But I have recently had blood work that's not the best, and it was absolutely the kick in the pants that I needed to just get 100% back on track. No cheating, just making all the right choices, doing it right. The first couple of weeks I've had some really good luck, but what I've gone back to is cooking at home all the time. From as basic as I can, like I've started my own broth. I want to keep enough, so I'm gonna pick up when we grocery shop tomorrow some chicken. And I'm gonna put some extra stock in the freezer. I am not at a point in my life right now where I wanna take up canning, but the season that I am in is freezing. I am just not in the canning phase of my life. I did canning when I was younger and had more time on my hands, but now I watch Acre Homestead. If you guys don't, you should go over and check her out. She doesn't need me to tell you that. She's got like 700,000 followers. She's amazing. But she does a lot of, well, she's a homesteader, and she does a lot of canning and preserving, and she has a freeze dryer. She grows her own food. She's really impressive and really fun to watch. But what she mentioned is using just these, basically they're like when you take away Chinese, I was thinking wonton soup when I saw them, but they are just the plastic containers. She just washes these up. After you make your chicken broth, you can ladle it out in this, leave a little bit of headspace so that it grows in the freezer. You don't want to blow your top off. But then you would have this just stacked in the freezer. You could have chicken broth ready to go. So like on a Sunday, you could make, with your Instant Pot, you could probably do 3 or 4 full pots full, and you would have enough to get you through a couple weeks. So that is my intent. So I ordered, I think there's 50. Yes, it is a set of 50 and they are 16 ounces. Usually I use 2 to 4, so even if I needed to use 2, I just thought it was a great idea. I'll link them below if you have any interest. Because I also feel like I'm using the Danielle Walker book for most of her recipes, and we're empty nesters. It's just my husband and I most nights, and there's always leftovers. And this would be a great way to just and stick it in the freezer. They're completely reusable. They are BPA free. I thought it was perfect. The other thing I got, does it tell you? Yes. Smart Take 200 piece. Let's say up to 450 degrees. Good to know, up to 450 degrees. I started back when we were doing all of our cooking in our house because restaurants were closed and all that. I read a whole article about aluminum foil. You know, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And they're not saying great things about cooking. I'm having a hard time getting this open. About cooking with aluminum foil and the metals leaching. I don't know if it's true or not. You know, who knows what you read on the internet, what is true. But I read enough about it from enough different sources that I thought it's just not worth the risk. This is 200 pieces of unbleached parchment paper. I feel very lucky because I don't know how this little bag that it came in is going to hold up, but I was purchasing it from King Arthur. This was much less. So I found it on Amazon. It is unbleached. It met all the same requirements. Oh, this does reseal, but I want it to be, I have it in a bag over there and I just slide a piece out. So I'll move this into that bag, but this was so much less expensive. So I use this now instead of aluminum foil whenever I can. Just to be safe, because I cook for my husband, I cook for myself, I cook for the kids, just to be safe. Okay, time to find something else to get into now. All right, guys, I just started to unbox my Thrive box and realized I had an hour and 45 minutes of raw video on this video already, so I don't think we're gonna add to it. I think I will start that under a new video. So thank you so much for coming by. Every time I do one of these videos, I have such respect for all the girls who do the vlogs. Unboxing is a piece of compared to these vlog girls who are out there dragging cameras and lights everywhere they go to try and show everything they do. If I were gonna vlog, I'd have to change so many things in my house. I'd have to move cabinets, these cabinets, because right there is where I stand and cook, and as you can tell, those are my height. I need better lighting. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope I will see you again really soon. Have a great evening, guys.